Hey everyone, it's Jack. It's time to pop back to the All-Star seasons to see where the winners almost lost the crown and the moment that they won the crown. The video where I talk about each winner and where they won the crown is now my most viewed video on my channel. So it's a no-brainer to now look at the All-Star seasons, which has a lot more chaos involved. Initially, I didn't want to talk about the All-Stars winners when it came to when they almost lost the crown because All-Stars can just get a little muddy when it comes to like people in the bottom. Towards the end of the season, they do the rule of if you're not in the top, you're in the bottom, which a lot of the time is kind of stupid. And a couple of the queens don't really belong there, but they just do it for the extra drama of it all. I do still think that it's worth talking about because each of the winners does have an interesting trajectory to the crown, even if the production of All-Stars is not as straightforward as the regular Drag Race seasons. And when we talk about the moment where they won the crown, that's a lot more straightforward. Make sure you like and subscribe, only about half of you are, and I'd love to have you here. And let's pop in with the first ever All-Stars winner, Chad Michaels. Chad's run on All-Stars 1 is strange because of the teams concept, but even looking at it through that lens, I feel like a lot of her placements make sense. The only time that Team Shad was at risk of being eliminated was in episode 1, where they were rightfully in the bottom. They definitely went way too cerebral with this whole concept in their photo shoot. With their half-baked look, I get what they were going for, but I don't think it really pulled off. And their second photo is kind of a mess in a lot of ways. They give the reasoning that Chad's drag is not as extravagant as Chanel's, which yeah, Chanel's drag is really big, but then you see what they were wearing on the runway for this week's episode, and it's like Chad is matching her with that extravagance. And of course, they didn't come to the competition knowing that they were going to be in teams, so the runways did lack a cohesion, and you can't be too mad at them for that, but out of everyone on that stage, these were the ones that looked the least similar. So that's why Chad was in the bottom, but it was against Mimi I'm First, who a lot of people just expected to be the first out. Like, she was cast on the season only to be the first one going home, unfortunately. So even if Chad almost lost the crown here, I'm pretty confident that she would have stayed regardless. The lip sync was fine, I'll talk about it more in the ranking video, but there were like 4 confessionals in this one, which I just have to point out. It was a crazy lip sync to start off a crazy season, but after this episode, Chad and Chanel definitely rose the ranks in the competition. A lot of people do say that this season was made for Chad in order to get her to win. You know, the whole thing, Chad about to die, so RuPaul wanted her to be happy. But even saying that, there was tough competition with this being one of the best All-Stars casts ever, and she definitely put in the work to earn that win. Basically, every subsequent episode got better and better for their team, and where I think she shined the most was in that final Superhero Girl challenge. They started the season lacking cohesion, and by the end, they were definitely on top of it. A perfect little redemption for the 6-episode season that Chad got. I also find it very strange that Chanel and Chad weren't the top 2 lip syncing, rather it being Raven and Chad. Even if Raven did very good in the last challenge, they weren't on a team together, and Chanel and Chad earned 3 wins together, while Raven and Jujubee unfortunately were in the bottom most of the season. So another moment that we knew she was going to win the crown was when Raven was her opponent over Chanel. Hey everyone, just want to pop in here and ask you a quick question. Have you ever seen this picture before? I surely hope so because it's been my profile pic for about a year now. I have to come clean though, this is not the raw photo. I know, it's crazy. My profile picture that I've been using for the past year was edited on today's sponsor, FaceApp. I was really excited to partner with them because I've been using this app way longer than this partnership because it's a seamless tool that is extremely easy to use. What I love about this app is that it's super simple to enhance your natural features rather than going from 0 to 100 right away. You can build a photo up. Take my original profile pic, which I'll redo right now. I had a couple pimples and some acne scars and some sun damage, stuff that like everyone gets, but not things that I need in a profile pic that people are gonna see every day. So I just go in and use something like a skin smoother, and then also the retouch feature just to get rid of that major pimple that is on my forehead. And after that, I'm looking like myself on my best day. As a content creator and just a person who likes to feel good posting online, FaceApp gives me that little extra push to put myself out there. If you've ever had a picture that you like, except for some little details, FaceApp can tweak everything to have you looking your best. It's free to download, super easy to use, and if you want to try FaceApp Pro for 1 week, you can use the link in the description or scan my QR code. After 1 week, it will be $5 a month if you choose the annual plan. Available on the App Store and Google Play. Thanks so much to FaceApp, and now let's get back to the video. Moving on to All-Stars 2, and I think everyone knows the moment where Alaska almost lost the crown. She preceded Manila in the makeover category, and the fact that she was dominating the competition up until this challenge, and then she brought an outfit that was relatively basic compared to the rest, and you can really see how hard it hit her in that moment. If there's one thing about Alaska in a competition, she's gonna wear her emotions on her sleeve, and you could tell how agonizing every moment felt to her after she heard her critiques, and her having to stand there and wallow in the frustration while everyone else was getting their critiques. By the time they get back to the workroom, she blows up and has this very quotable moment.
I fucked up this week, man. I fucked up. And it really sucks. I need to go to the end of this competition. Party.
The sheer anger and desperation that Alaska is conveying in this moment, as if she actually just lost the competition rather than just being in the bottom for the first time, it's extremely entertaining, while at the same time it does leave a bad taste in your mouth. At this point, she was the type of person where you couldn't really say anything to make her feel better in that moment, and she just kind of had to ride out the emotions, which made the rest of the people in the room pretty tense. Regardless, she didn't go home here, and I don't know if she ever gave Detox 10k via PayPal, but the potential bribe plus their friendship was enough to keep her in the competition. There is a conspiracy theory around this whole moment that I don't know if Alaska was talking about or someone close to her, but basically, even though she was at the most risk of going home during this moment, the fact that she had this blow up and showed this vulnerability, it actually helped her win the crown at the end. She was almost too perfect over the course of the competition, so they needed to see a moment like this in order to justify her as like the true contender winner. I don't know how much I completely buy it, because for the most part, this just kind of paints Alaska in a pretty bad light. If anything, this moment would detract from her win at the end as opposed to add points, but at the same time, it is really cool to see someone so competitive take home the win at the end. I definitely don't think it was the moment that she won the season though. I think that comes in the snatch game of the season. It was super early on, and you could pick another performance like her in the branding challenge, because that makes a lot of sense for like why someone should win, but that Mae West is just one of the best snatch game performances we've ever seen, and to hear recently that they cut out even more moments where RuPaul was dying, that's how you know how great of a performance it was. We knew a lot about Alaska going into the season, knowing her strengths and everything, and she was able to exceed expectations of her talents and go like 10 times as hard. She's had 2 great snatch games, and I really hope at some point we can get a third one if she ever does patch her whole thing with WoW, but if that never happens, she can still live on the legacy of having one of the strongest All-Stars performances ever. And moving on to quite the opposite of a super strong snatch game, we have Trixie Mattel's on All-Stars 3. I just talked about this in last week's video and how this performance is truly just not good. It was a huge risk to do RuPaul in front of RuPaul, and while I do think the performance starts out relatively strong, as the performance goes on, she just has more and more missed jokes, swinging pretty big beyond just the answers she had on her cards. It was definitely a pretty big shock seeing Trixie flounder this much in a comedy challenge, because she set herself up so much on this season and just online to show that she is really good at comedy normally. We even saw her do super well in another improv challenge earlier in the season. But Snatch Game is just a different beast with the whole impersonation angle. That room is just quiet and dead, and it got to Trixie for sure. Then we get to her runway, which behind the scenes they described as dripping in flowers, which she did, but then she got one of my least favorite critiques that they give on Drag Race, saying that this was too much, which is valid sometimes, but when you look at Trixie's outfit, it looks very cohesive. She was put into the bottom this week, with Shangela being in the top, someone who she just got in an argument with, so Trixie truly thought she was going home, and it didn't help that Shangela's speech right before she revealed her lipstick was basically describing everything about Trixie that we knew, and then she revealed her lipstick to show Chi-Chi. It was a really crazy bait and switch, and after this episode, we see Trixie start to rise a lot more in the competition. This was like the turning point for her, which I don't know if they really planned that storyline-ish for her in the beginning. I think Trixie to them was a very confusing piece on All-Stars 3 because they knew how popular she was, but they didn't know exactly what to do with her, especially with someone like Benda LaCreme dominating the competition. And I think a moment you could point to where she won the crown is when Dela eliminated herself. This is no shade, I'm not saying Trixie is a bad winner, but when there's a queen in the competition winning 5 out of 6 challenges and then they decide to eliminate themselves, the check was basically written out to Ben at that point, and she just opened the door for someone else to take it instead. The other moment that I look at is with the other twist of the season being the jury twist. I look at this moment less so because of the unfairness and how it kind of pushed Trixie towards the crown, and instead look at it from Trixie's performance perspective, in which she gave an extremely strong speech and a strong argument as to why she should be in the top 2. She already had a really good relationship with most of the queens in the competition, but even if she didn't, I think she answered each question so well, articulating all of her points and basically saying everything that the queens wanted to hear. They were rooting for Trixie in the competition, and her being able to own that and be a competitor, I think they really enjoyed her for that reason, and it's why she made the top 2. And looking slightly beyond that, but staying in the same episode, she also had my favorite performance overall. The best verse in Kitty Girl, my favorite final runway. She ended the season really strong, and I think it's another reason why she won the crown. We have the Twinners up next, and we will talk about Trinity first because I feel like her run is a little more simple. The closest she was to ever losing the crown I think would come in the roast, where she was in the bottom, although it was revealed that both Monet and Manila picked Valentina to go home if they actually got to eliminate anyone. This was the only time where Trinity was actually up for elimination in the season. This was definitely her weakest performance aside from maybe the finale with Super Queen, but she was one of the queens to really preach I want to beat the best at the end of the competition, and for the most part I think queens respected that and they would have never really sent her home. The following week she was also technically up for elimination in the La La Lollapalooza, but she was going up against Jasmine Masters, who was the first out of the season, and Trinity is also just a really strong lip syncer, so I don't see a world where she would have lost this lip sync unless she did like her granny reveal that she did like the week later. Where she won the crown, you could say where Manila was eliminated in the competition, but I think that's more justifying why Manila lost the crown as opposed to Trinity actually winning it. Her performance in Snatch Game was pretty strong, her talent show showed a lot of really good branding, but I think winning the last acting challenge of the season and the subsequent lip sync, that was where she showed some of her strongest work and sold herself one last time in light of the frontrunner going home in the previous week. Monet, on the other hand, is a little more tricky to decipher because she was in the bottom a couple times. But out of the 2 times that she was in the bottom, we have confirmation that one of those times, if Manila won that lip sync, she would have sent Monet home. They set up this whole storyline between Latrilla and Mohart and Monet, basically the battle of best friends both in the top and in the bottom. Mohart was able to come out on top in the situation and save Monet, but regardless, it did have major ripple effects on the season, with Monet also choosing Manila's lipstick later on in the competition, completely sealing her fate. The moment that I think Monet won the season would come in the roast episode where Trinity was also in the bottom. While I think Mohart had a strong performance, it was very clear that both Manila and Monet were above every other person in the competition, with Monet specifically having the best roast set of the night. And she also has one of my favorite lip sync performances of the season with Jump to It. It was a double win between them, and I think it is a very valid double win, but I would also give it solo to Monet if it wasn't for the Lollapalooza that happened in the following week. We got to see the major strengths of Monet in this episode, both in comedy and extreme lip sync prowess. And these are 2 performances that I revisit pretty often. All Stars 5 is where things start to get messy with placements because the winner of the season was up for elimination multiple times, with the bottom placements that came later being up to the whole if you're not in the top, you're in the bottom rule, which was definitely at full force and the worst on All Stars 5. Shea landed in the bottom for both the ball and stand-up challenges at the end of the season, even though her performances were both pretty good, and I don't think there was any world where the queens would send her home in these episodes. Her bottom placement in episode 3, on the other hand, had a lot of major impacts on the season. With the change in the format implementing democracy and the queens voting who weren't in the top, a couple of the queens had the idea to potentially vote Shea out, causing her to get 2 votes, one from Alexis and one from Mayhem. Fortunately, more people voted for Mariah and she went home. In episode 4, they revealed the votes and Shea saw just how much danger that she was actually in, and while basically everything was put on a pause after that, these 2 votes came back to haunt Alexis later in the season.
You're a liar, and this is why Derek don't like you.
That part of the story isn't important to Shea's story, but those 2 votes go to show that there were people in the competition who were ready to play the game. Unfortunately, the rest of the queens weren't. While Shea being in the bottom that many times could have been a lot more nerve-wracking, instead of most of the queens playing like Naomi and eliminating the frontrunner, they instead played a lot more safe and went off of track record. I am happy that Shea was so protected on this season because the queens were not really playing risky at all, because her winning at the end was so deserved and it makes me really happy. At the same time though, it did not make for interesting TV with basically every elimination being super straightforward. The moment that she won the season, her Love the Skin You're In runway I think had major impacts, but there's actually another runway that I look to as the one that's more important to like the whole Drag Race storyline. Her prom look with the references to both Carrie and the rose petal incident from season 9. Shea coming back to All Stars was extremely inevitable, but she could not come back to the season without addressing the major upset that happened at the finale of season 9. They even wanted to push the storyline even more with Sasha Velour coming back as a lip sync assassin for the season, but Sasha was definitely smart enough to say no to that. And Shea was also super smart for playing into this moment. She completely owned the moment, talked about how it affected her and how she overcame it, and I think that's exactly what the showrunners wanted when she came back to the competition. All Star 6 is another season where the winner ends up in the bottom a couple times, but once again, 2 of the bottom placements are towards the end of the season with the dumb rule. I do think that the last episode of the season where Kylie does end up in the bottom, there is a chance that she could go home. The queens were so happy to see her and they were just so supportive of her being there, but out of that top 5, she had one of the lesser track records if we were looking at it, so I can't see a world where Eureka sends her home justifying it based off of track record, but instead there was almost the default answer of going with Trinity K. Bonet instead, and she herself knew it too. The time that Kylie was in the bottom early on in the season, I would also say there was a risk of her going home, but then you see how people voted and she didn't get a single vote out of the 3 people in the bottom, and Ginger was in the top that week and she was in a group with Kylie, so I don't think she would have sent her home either. She was much more risk at the end game as opposed to the early game. Where Kylie won the season, I mean, you could say the dirty lip sync. It's one of the best blowout lip syncs we've ever seen, and I love her performance in this. But while a lot of the quote-unquote moments can be a little more broad or abstract, like saying a queen's performance in a challenge is why they won the crown, for Kylie's run, you can pinpoint an exact moment. We all know what it is, where she recovers from her fall in the final lip sync. The entire season was such a two-horse race between her and Raja, both embodying the idea of redemption and everything, and I think this was one of the major times where the finale performances really played a factor in who was going to win at the end. Both had extremely strong performances, but the way that Kylie recovered after falling on her coat, they created a huge moment out of it, and it was the last little thing that she needed. Jinx Monsoon in All-Star 7, there isn't really a time where she was at jeopardy of being eliminated because there were no eliminations this season, so we more have to look at a time where another queen could have taken the crown over them, and of course it is the finale lip sync with her and Monet. This is one of my least favorite lip syncs ever because the cut of the lip sync is terrible and everybody knows it. They didn't even try to hide how much they were cutting out, and they tried to make Jinx look like the winner, but it was so clear how well Monet performed here. I've said my thoughts about how lackluster lip sync for the crown is in an All-Stars format, especially both here and on All-Stars 10. I don't think it serves either winner super well. They did so well over the course of the season, and then they just don't have the best performance at the very end. Jinx is a great performer, but just not the best lip syncer in a Drag Race sense, so lip syncing against Monet is a super tough feat, and I think Jinx herself knew that she wasn't really going to stand a chance in a lot of ways. All of this to say that I think if they wanted to justify a Monet win at the end, they definitely could have with this lip sync. But Jinx's dominance on All-Star 7 is just undeniable, and her winning was basically inevitable. You can pick basically any of her challenge performances here as justification for when she won the crown, but the most popular answer is her Judy Garland and Snatch Game. She was able to balance references, original jokes, and the deepest of deep cuts of Drag Race. Her bringing up something that her makeover partner Dave said 9 years ago was one of the most genius things she could have done, and only someone like Jinx could think of that. She stole the show in practically every way, but it never felt like she was overpowering everyone else. You always wanted to come back and see what she was gonna do next. All-Stars 8, if you don't remember most of it, I don't blame you. Jimbo completely dominated this competition, and her win at the end was so deserved. It was painfully obvious that she was winning, with the only uncertainty coming right at the end of the competition, where she lands in the bottom 2 and her fate is up to Candy Muse. Candy could have been extremely cutthroat here and eliminated Jimbo and probably go on to win the entire season, but Jimbo put in the work on the season and with her alliance with Candy, and I think that just really played into who Candy was, and she didn't really want to take out Jimbo in this moment. Yet out of everyone that we've talked about in this video, this is still one of the riskiest eliminations that could have happened. That elimination was served to Candy on a golden platter if she wanted it, and it just ultimately came down to Candy respecting Jimbo's game. For where she won the season, I'm debating between two episodes. The first is Snatch Game, where she has an extremely strong impression of Shirley Temple, and arguably one of, if not her best runway of the season. However, this was still in the thick of her storyline on the season, basically being the saddest little frontrunner who can't get a lip sync win. So the other episode that I might pick is where she finishes that storyline, beating Silky Nutmeg Ganache in a lip sync. It feels a little manufactured with her getting a lip sync win against one of the top lip syncers of the show, the song choice being Freakazoid and her busting out her UK versus the World outfit. It was definitely a perfect storm that helped her out. This is also the episode where she brings her Joan Crawford back, which calls back to her original Canada season. Basically everything is coming full circle, and it caps off her storyline super well. I think ultimately I still will go with Snatch Game because after that episode, I don't think anyone was ever touching her. She had 3 wins in 5 episodes, and even if she still couldn't win a lip sync, the challenges are what matters more, and her performance here was just too strong. All-Stars 9 is another non-elimination season, so we have to look at another queen's performance that could have beat Angeria at the end. And I think the main two that we would look at are either Plastique or Roxy. Plastique was dominating the runway the entire competition and was doing much better in comedy challenges than expected. But a lot like Jimbo, even though she was doing good in the challenges, she could not win those lip syncs. And at the very end, even though she had a super strong talent show, she wasn't put in the top. Roxy also had great runways, was doing good in the challenges, and made the top 3. Both her and Angie had great final performances in the Janet lip sync, and if they wanted to pick Roxy, they definitely could have. She had a ton of fan support, redeemed herself from her previous seasons. It was definitely a toss-up, and I don't think there was a wrong or right answer. They simply just went with Angie. Where she won the season, I think I would have to choose her acting challenge performance. This is one of the main examples I look to when discussing why Angie won at the end. Her interactions with RuPaul and how they worked in the scene together, you can tell just how much RuPaul enjoys her. She promoted herself so well in this moment, and ultimately I think it is little things like this that got her the win at the end. And finally, we have All-Stars 10. It's another one of those seasons where there aren't a lot of elimination episodes, and I don't think Ginger was really really ever at jeopardy of going home. Her situation is a lot like Jinx's. If they wanted to justify a Jorgeous win for the top 2 lip sync, they definitely could have. The cut for It's Raining Men was definitely not as bad as Swish Swish, but I don't think the focus was on Jorgeous for most of the lip sync. I'll say it again, I think Ginger is a really good lip syncer. We've seen it so many times. But the issue is, we have seen it so many times, so ending on a lip sync for the crown doesn't really sell her as much as I think they wanted it to. Mostly because we'd already seen her lip sync 3 times that season, and we would have to see her lip sync 3 more times, just leading to extreme fatigue. What I have been saying though is that if they ended on the talent show, I think it would have been a much stronger finish for Ginger. And I think the talent show is where she won the season. You could make the argument that she won on the design challenge because it was like the one element that she couldn't really ever get down, but to be honest, I don't really love the result of that episode and everything, and I'd rather just talk about this talent show because I think it is incredible. The big issue with Ginger's previous talent shows is that she always tried to be super serious. She's a great theatrical singer, and I'm glad that she's able to show that off, but she's also really funny, and we never really got to see that. So doing an original song where she can pull off the theatrics and be funny, it created a very special performance, and it's one of her most justified placements of the season. We've made it through all of the All-Stars winners. Maybe I'll get around to doing this for both the Canada versus the World seasons or UK, and maybe I can talk about Global, but that means I have to relive Global. For right now, I think we'll call it here. I actually had a lot more fun recording this video than I thought I would. Having to relive the intricacies and the crazy antics of All-Stars was a super fun process to talk about. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks to my tier 2 patrons. And thank you to my tier 3 patrons who will always be all-stars: Frankie, Jack, Jose, and Steely. And one last final thank you to FaceApp for sponsoring today's video. You can click the link in the description or scan my QR code for 1 week of Pro for free. I'll see you soon with another video.